Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to my show. It's called McDuff Lives, and tonight, um, by special request from Kathy Sue, who is here in the chat room. Kathy, I love you. I can't say no to you, so let's let her rip. You see that Olivia back here. She's brought her 1814, Fort McHenry American flag, and I know you're probably surprised that Ospreys have flags, but she says that this was passed down through her Osprey generations to now. I don't know if I believe her, but that's the story, and so at least you know what the story is, and that's maybe a story for the birds. I don't know, but anyway, by request, because of a successful New Orleans boat trip today, Kathy Sue says celebrate, play play the Battle of New Orleans. So I'll see what I can do with it here. Um, haven't got my backup band, but maybe just a little rhythm on the fiddle. In 1814, we took a little trip along with Colonel Jackson down the mighty Mississippi. We took a little bacon and we took a little beans, and we caught the bloody British in the town of New Orleans, and we fired our guns. The British kept it coming. Wasn't nigh as many as there was a while ago. They fired once more and they began to running down the Mississippi to the Gulf of Mexico. Well, we looked down the river and we seen the British come, and there must have been 100 of them beating on a drum. They stepped so high and they made the bugles ring. We stood behind the cotton bales and didn't say a thing. We fired our guns. There wasn't nigh as many as there was a while ago. We fired once more and they began to running down the Mississippi to the Gulf of Mexico. Old Hickory said we could take 'em by surprise if we didn't fire our muskets till we looked 'em in the eye. We held our fire till we see their faces well, and we opened up our squirrel guns and gave 'em bloody. Well, we fired our guns and the British kept it coming, and there wasn't nigh as many as there was a while ago. We fired once more and they began to running down the Mississippi to the Gulf of Mexico. Yeah, they ran through the briars and they ran through the brambles and they ran through the bushes where a rabbit couldn't go. They ran so fast that the hounds couldn't catch them on down the Mississippi to the Gulf of Mexico. And we fired our guns and the British kept it coming. Wasn't near as many as there was a while ago. We fired once more. They began to running down the Mississippi to the Gulf of Mexico. We fired our cannon till the barrel melted down, and we grabbed an alligator and we fought another round. We filled his head with cannonballs and powdered his behind, and we touched the powder off. The gator lost his mind. We fired our guns and the British kept it coming. There wasn't nigh as many as there was a while ago. Fired once more and they began to running down the Mississippi to the Gulf of Mexico. All right, let me pick up the bow. All right, there you have it, the Battle of New Orleans. And Yeah, that's for you, Kathy Sue. Just because you asked. Yeah, I don't do that for anybody but Kathy Sue now. Don't you get your hopes up there, everybody. I'm not going to let you call the tune. It's just for Kathy because she's such a sweet person and a good friend. All right, let me put this down. Hmm. All right, well, happy Saturday night, everybody. It's last night of my week. I'll be taking tomorrow off as usual on Sundays. Never know if something happens. I decide I better jump on the internet, but I like to have a day off, and also I like to take my Wednesday mornings off. So, but you'll find that I do 11 shows a week, 4 at 11 a.m. except for Wednesdays. I mean 5 at 11 a.m. except for Wednesdays, and then 6 of them at 8 p.m. right here on McDuff Lives and on YouTube. And we're kind of waiting to see what they say about my channel. They gave me a strike and demonetized me just over a month ago, and I've contacted them. I sent them a proposal to see if we can resolve it. We'll see what they say. I wanted you to see Olivia's flag up closer because it's just so nice to have, such a patriotic osprey. I know that's what we have down here. We have patriotic ospreys. And thanks, Olivia, for bringing this flag along. It really means a lot to everybody. Yeah. Ospreys looking over our shoulder and watching out for us. Any day now, they'll be back. The ones here that live on the nest on the island, and then these, snowbirds, right? They go down south. All right, chapter 6 of Cassidy's Run by David Wise. The Deception. Joe Cassidy was a plain-spoken man, not by nature guileful, but the FBI agents who originally recruited him had unexpected good fortune. The modest master sergeant possessed the one quality that would carry him through. Joe Cassidy was a natural actor. And that quality was precisely what the FBI was counting on as the Bureau and intelligence officials in the Defense Department began planning the deception late in 1965. In intelligence operations, deception material is also known as disinformation. Ironically, the very word disinformation, although adopted by U.S. counterintelligence, appears to have originated with the Russian word desinformatsiya. In 1959, the KGB created a disinformation department known as Department D, part of the first Chief Directorate, headed by General Ivan I. Agayants. Its duties included fabricating documents and planting false intelligence to confuse and mislead foreign governments. In the Pentagon, an elaborate machinery existed to create and approve disinformation. False information was controlled by a whole series of secret boards under J3, the operations umbrella of the Joint Chiefs. The FBI's requests for deception material dealing with nerve gas were referred to one arm of J3, the United States Evaluation Board, USEB, a little-known interagency intelligence committee. Its members were the heads of the intelligence organizations of the military services, along with representatives from the FBI and the CIA. The USEB was the first panel to rule on any deception operation that involved the military. After the USEB, the proposal moved over to another unit under J3, the Special Assistant for Clandestine and Special Activity, SACSA. Interesting. He got the name slightly wrong. It's the Special Assistant for Counterinsurgency and Special Activities, but that is SACSA that he's referring to. That's, of course, is where my dad worked for 10 years, from 62 to his death in 71. After SACSA approved the plan, since Shocker was an Army project, it was sent to the Army's Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations. That is DCS Ops or DES Ops. Finally, after DES Ops signed off on the proposal, it moved to the Army's Office of Chief Research and Development, OCRD, which prepared the feed for the FBI. I'm going to add a couple of the footnotes here, just for the record, because we're so close to my dad's own work. Footnote 1, the FBI's official intelligence glossary defines disinformation as a carefully contrived misinformation prepared by an intelligence service for the purpose of misleading, deluding, disrupting, or undermining confidence in individuals, organizations, or governments. Footnote 2, the Department of Defense has declined to make any comment about Operation Shocker. For 4 years, the United States Army Intelligence and Security Command, that is INSCOM, in Fort Meade, Maryland, insisted in response to several FOIA requests by the author that it had no record of Operation Shocker under that or any other of the several other code names used for the operation over more than 2 decades. As far as the Army was concerned, it never existed. At the author's behest, Kenneth Bacon, Assistant Secretary of Defense for Public Affairs, asked the Secretary of the Army, Togo West Jr., whether any information about the operation could be released. West ordered a review. On May the 27th, 1997, Bacon responded to the author saying that the files had indeed been located but remained classified and would not be released. When subsequently pressed, Bacon said, "There is a security issue here." He declined to elaborate. At FBI headquarters, the deception operation was supervised by Eugene C. Peterson, a veteran counterintelligence agent in the Soviet section. A big, burly professional counter-spy, Peterson had the face of a boxer, a broad pug nose with a horizontal scar between intent blue eyes, a face with a lot of miles on it. In the course of his 28-year career with the FBI, he worked on most of the major Soviet cases of the Cold War. Despite his tough-looking exterior, Peterson was an affable, pleasant man from Aberdeen, South Dakota, where his father drove a laundry truck and his mother worked as the firm's bookkeeper. Peterson enlisted in the Army Air Corps out of high school, then graduated from Northern State Teachers College in Aberdeen in 1951 and joined the FBI. He began his counterintelligence career in Puerto Rico in 1960. 4 years later, Peterson was transferred to headquarters to work against Soviet spies. He rose to chief of the Soviet section in 1976. Although an elaborate structure of Pentagon boards and committees had approved Shocker, the actual control of the operation rested in the hands of a small number of people. Peterson at FBI headquarters, successive case agents at the Washington field office, and across the Potomac in the Pentagon, Taro Yoshihashi, the Army's top counter-espionage expert. A quiet, self-effacing man who worked deep in the intelligence bureaucracy, Yoshihashi was a double agent specialist and thus the FBI's point of contact inside the Defense Department. Born in Hollywood, California, to a Japanese-American family, Yoshihashi earned a degree in psychology from the University of California at Los Angeles and joined the Army in 1942, not long before the rest of his family was evacuated to a relocation camp in Cody, Wyoming. Assigned to General Douglas MacArthur's headquarters in Brisbane, Australia, Yoshihashi maintained files on all Japanese army units with the help of magic, the decrypted messages obtained after the United States broke the Japanese code. After the war, the Army sent him to investigate the biological warfare experiments conducted by the Japanese against civilians in Manchuria. He was assigned to the Pentagon in 1968. As a double agent specialist, Yoshihashi was also the Army's representative on the staff of USEB. As in the case of many obscure government panels, USEB's staff really ran it. In the 5 years I was there, Yoshihashi recalled, the principals at USEB only met once in January of 1972. The meeting was in the basement of the Pentagon in one of the J3 offices. James J. Angleton, the CIA's controversial chief of counterintelligence, showed up for the rare meeting. Angleton, who trusted no one, had nearly destroyed the CIA, trying to unearth moles who he was convinced were burrowing away inside the agency. At the meeting, he was true to form. Quote, Angleton was the agency representative. At one point, he said, I have a lot of interesting information I could give you, but I'm not sure about your security here. I thought, what a lot of BS. Although the CIA, through its membership on USEB, was aware of the nerve gas deception, it exercised no operational control. In the jargon of the intelligence world, Cassidy was the FBI's asset, not the CIA's, not the Army's. The Army's role was merely providing support, Yoshihashi noted. It was a bureau operation. I would get requests from Gene Peterson. The Bureau would bring the documents from Edgewood and say, can we release these? Gene or the Bureau's liaison agent would bring the documents over to the Pentagon. Then I would go to DC SOPS, or DESOPS, I suppose they call it, the Army's chief of operations, for approval. In some cases, I would make a recommendation the material should not be released. Most of the documents that we approved, except for the deception, were true information. Yoshihashi said Peterson, while responsible along with a few other officials for managing the operation, did not deal directly with Cassidy. That was the job of the case agents in the field, and during the deception phase of Shocker, that meant Jimmy Morrissey. In the fall of 1964, a major shift of positions had occurred in the FBI's Washington field office. Ludwig Obendorf, the counterintelligence chief, was assigned to headquarters. Special Agent William J. Lander took over S3, the GRU squad. At the same time, Donald Grunsel, who had been Cassidy's case agent, was promoted to supervisor of S2, the KGB squad. It thus fell to Jimmy Morrissey to run Cassidy during the most sensitive phase of the operation. Pardon me a second. All right, here we go. In its final form, the plan was, in a sense, a triple deception. There were G-series gases up to letter H, Yoshihashi said. The deception was to say we now have GJ. It was fictitious. Secondly, the claim of a new and powerful GJ nerve gas might lead Moscow to conclude, by implication, that the Edgewood scientists had also created a nerve gas labeled GI. The third aspect of the deception was that the bogus documents be passed to Moscow by Cassidy were also to reveal that GJ existed in binary form. The decision to tell the Soviet Union about a breakthrough nerve gas designated GJ had a grain of truth embedded within it, since the Edgewood scientists had in fact tried to do so and failed. The effort had taken place, but the results disclosed to the GRU were false. Most former officials privy to the deception declined to discuss it. One ex-FBI agent familiar with Operation Shocker, however, agreed to talk about the deception, the most sensitive phase of the long-running case, on the condition that he not be named. We had spent a lot of money, and we thought, hell, make them do it. It was hoped the operation would lead the Soviets in turn to spend time and resources on trying to develop the same weapon system. In binary form, it was as a, quote, we tried and couldn't, so let's make them spend money on it attitude. The FBI's files confirm this purpose. In December 1965, FBI headquarters informed the Washington field office that the deception operation had been authorized based on material developed by the Army. The deception would involve a lethal chemical agent, many times more effective than any then available. For, quote, technical reasons, it was said, the United States had decided not to deploy this weapon, but would pass the information on to the Soviet Union in a controlled manner. The objective was to cause the Soviets to conduct extensive research and to commit money, personnel, training, and material to replicate or defend against a chemical agent that the United States had not actually produced, and therefore had no intention of using. Another former FBI official who insisted on anonymity was willing cautiously to describe the nerve gas that the Soviets were led to believe had been developed. It was a very unstable and it could not be stored, so it could not be put in a weapon. It would not maintain its toxicity, and there was no antidote for it. So the idea was we give it to the Soviets, they make it, and then discover it's unstable and no antidote exists, so it can't be used. Because how would they protect their own troops? Now the double agent operation had escalated into a risky, high-stakes gamble, for at its core, the deception over nerve gas was designed to mislead Moscow into believing that the United States was ahead in the chemical warfare arms race. Any deception operation carries with it a risk. The documents passed by Cassidy to Mikhail Danilin contained enough true information mixed in with the false to get the Russians to believe all of it. The risk was that Soviet scientists might find the true information valuable and use it to make breakthroughs that had eluded America's scientists. The Joint Chiefs, the Army, and the FBI agents who actually ran the operation knew and weighed the danger, but they also knew that the Soviets were already engaged in full-scale research and production of nerve gases. The competition between the two countries to develop newer and more lethal nerve gases was already a reality. Because of that, the officials in Washington reasoned it was worth the risk to try and lead the Soviets down an expensive false trail. Another ex-FBI official said the scientists had reassured the Bureau that the formula could safely be passed. Quote, we were assured it wouldn't work, he said. So it sounded great and looks great, but it will break down at the end. It was made in the lab, but never put into production. Had the Bureau considered the risks? Yes, he replied, they did. But since they were assured it wouldn't work, they felt it would be okay. One of those who worried about where the operation might lead was Henry Anthony Strecker, who served in a senior post in Army intelligence at the time. The whole business made Harry Strecker nervous. Quote, I remember sitting in on a bureau briefing with Gene Peterson where they talked about an operation out of Edgewood, he said. We called it spiel material, which means play material. I remember a nerve gas we didn't make. Someone at the briefing expressed concern that if we drove the Soviets looking into a bogus formula, is there a legitimate concern we might drive them to a breakthrough we don't want them to have? Next chapter is chapter 7, and it's called Washington Game. Early in 1966, Cassidy began passing the false information about nerve gas to Mikhail Danilin. From the Soviet embassy in Washington, the disturbing intelligence about GJ, the powerful new chemical weapon developed by the United States, was relayed to Moscow. The deception phase of Operation Shocker continued for 3.5 years, until July 1969. Throughout this period, the GRU pressed for more information about the new nerve gas, and Cassidy obliged with more documents, some real, some fake. Cassidy's importance to the Russians had suddenly increased spectacularly. Now, more secure arrangements were needed to pass the vital film coming out of Edgewood and to transmit instructions to the sergeant. In March 1966, Danilin unveiled to Cassidy 2 kinds of spy paraphernalia that were to be used for communication between them. First, he introduced Cassidy to microdots, tiny circular specks of film on which vast amounts of data could be reduced to a size no bigger than a printed period. He was to receive future instructions on microdots, Danilin explained. To enable Cassidy to enlarge the microdots to make them legible, Danilin gave him a portable microdot reader. At the same meeting, Danilin gave Cassidy a short course on how to make an artificial hollow rock. From that time on, Danilin said, the GRU's microdots and the rollover cameras from Cassidy were to be exchanged inside fake rocks. The rocks, he explained, needed to be so realistic looking that they could safely be left in a park, in the woods, or even on a street. He told me how to take the rollover camera and wrap it in wax paper, then tinfoil over that, and then cover it with plaster of Paris. Plaster of Paris is a gray powder. You add water and mix it in a bucket, and it has the consistency of dough or spackle. You mold it around the tinfoil and let it harden. It made a coating about 1/4 of an inch thick. It would dry in an hour. Sometimes I'd rub sand or dirt on it. The rocks were light gray or darker. Cassidy quickly became an expert at fashioning the phony rocks. To any casual observer, they were indistinguishable from real ones. Now the meetings and exchanges of material between Danilin and Cassidy began to follow a set procedure, a sort of espionage ballet. The choreography seldom varied. First, I would go to a drop site and leave my rock, with the rollover camera inside. The drop sites were listed in the instructions. A lot of them were near Burke, Virginia, a Washington suburb. Cassidy then drove to a designated point near Springfield. While he was en route, a Soviet retrieved Cassidy's rock. In Springfield, Mike would be waiting on the street. Or I would park and walk a block to where he was waiting. Then he would get in my car and we'd drive to the parking lot of the bowling alley. Always at 9 p.m. At the personal meetings, nothing would pass. We'd part around 11. This way, the Russians reasoned, if something went wrong and the FBI swooped down on the parking lot, neither man had any documents. They were just 2 people chatting by a bowling alley. At the meetings, Danilin discussed the previous batch of material Cassidy had provided and what he might be looking at next. When we left the bowling alley, we'd drive in my car to wherever he said, and I would drop him off. It was always different from where I picked him up, but always in Springfield. Cassidy then drove to a prearranged spot to pick up a fake rock that Danilin had left for him before their personal meeting. Inside were instructions in secret writing, a microdot, and cash. The instructions listed more drop and pickup sites and the dates of future meetings. The next day, I would give the rock to the FBI. Although Cassidy had the portable microdot reader, it was much easier for the FBI to blow up the microdot in its laboratory and relay Moscow's instructions to Cassidy. Neither Cassidy nor the FBI would easily have found a microdot inside a rock, but Cassidy was always told where to look. Those instructions came on what appeared to be a blank sheet of paper with secret writing, or SW as it is known in the espionage trade. Cassidy then steamed the sheet of paper, and the message became visible. Usually, the microdot was tucked away in a slit in a matchbook cover that was placed inside the rock. One matchbook had a picture of a Mississippi River paddle steamer. The SW instructions told Cassidy to look under a particular section of the paddle wheel. In addition to enlarging the microdots to full-page size, the FBI photographed the entire contents of every rock retrieved by Cassidy, including the cache. These were all recorded on 8x10 color prints. The Bureau watched most of Cassidy's meetings with Danilin, and it kept the Russian apartment under surveillance. The FBI also tried to follow and photograph Danilin when he cleared drop sites, but that was extremely difficult in the remote wooded areas of northern Virginia favored by the Soviets. The Russians chose such isolated areas because it was fairly easy to spot anyone who might be following them. Normally, a Soviet agent also had a partner watching his back. Physical surveillance of Soviets at a drop was almost impossible, Charlie Bevels said. They were aware of it, and they ran counter-surveillance. Once Danilin was scheduled to clear a drop in a very dark rural area. The lab wanted to use infrared film to get a picture of him clearing the drop. I said no, because when you use an infrared bulb, if you are looking straight at it, you can see it go off. I didn't want to take the chance. On another occasion, the Bureau was frustrated in its surveillance efforts by the unexpected. I remember one personal meeting they had at the Rose Hill Shopping Center in Northern Virginia, off Franconia Road. Bevels said, "We had cameras and we were in a house that the owners left at our request. We assured them that the house would not be disturbed. There would be no shooting. We had given them $25. Go out to dinner. We'll be here a couple of hours. But at Rose Hill, some guy in a huge tractor trailer, Interstate Movers was their name, parked it right in our way. We couldn't see anything." The GRU understood that Cassidy was not passing secret documents for ideological reasons. As far as the Soviets knew, he was betraying his country for dollars. Since Cassidy never split open the rocks before handing them over to the FBI, he never knew exactly how much money they held. But according to Charlie Bevels, the rocks often contained $10,000 at a time, usually in a little baggie rolled up inside the rocks. Sometimes there was more than that. But at the meetings with Danilin, Cassidy, playing his role, continually pressed for more money. If the Soviets tended to think of Americans as greedy and materialistic, then he would meet their expectations. "I was always crying for money. I have a teenage daughter, child support. I have to buy food, clothes, insurance. The piddling amounts you're giving me aren't worth the chance I'm taking," unquote. Despite Cassidy's complaints to the Soviets that he was being underpaid, the money was rolling in, albeit into the FBI's coffers to finance the operation. With the GRU paying Cassidy tens of thousands of dollars, the Russians worried that he may display his new wealth conspicuously. His Soviet handlers had warned him to spend money carefully and to avoid buying anything that would attract attention. Intelligence work is highly compartmentalized. Although Taro Yoshihashi monitored the operation from the Pentagon and was deeply involved in the feed, He never met Joe Cassidy, though he admired him from afar. I felt Cassidy was one of the most competent double agents we ever had, Yoshihashi said. For example, when he bought a freezer, he said to the Soviets, I have enough cash now to buy this, but I did a down payment just like everybody else. When Cassidy needed to write to the GRU, he was instructed to use the special carbon paper he had been given earlier. He recalled how it worked. The carbon was reddish but dark. It looked normal except for the red color. I would take a sheet of ordinary paper and make a pencil mark to show the writing will be on that side. I would put this special carbon on top of the paper, another paper on top of the carbon, and clip the three together. Then I would take a pencil and write the message. It left no visible marks on the bottom sheet. I'd give the top sheet to my FBI handler and save the carbon paper to use again. I was left with a blank sheet of paper with the invisible writing. I would put that sheet with the secret writing in the rock. Cassidy used this method to confirm a meeting date or a drop site or to answer requests from Danilin. Sometimes he would ask whether I could get him something, and I would respond in a letter that I could or could not, or I was still looking for it. Sometimes I would say a drop site they proposed was no good. It was in an area where there were too many people around. Cassidy got on well with Jimmy Morrissey. As it happened, he had a lot in common with his new case agent. Both were born into working-class Irish-American families, and they hit it off from the start. Morrissey was a quintessential Boston Irishman with a soft New England brogue. Born in Charlestown, the blue-collar neighborhood of the triple-decker houses that sent John F. Kennedy and Thomas P. Tip O'Neill to Congress, the FBI man was one of 5 children of immigrants who came over from County Wexford around the turn of the century. His father was a freight handler at a cold storage warehouse. In the wilderness of mirrors, as counterintelligence has been called, seemingly unrelated spy cases often interlock, their threads becoming entangled with one another. So it was with one GRU case that had an impact on Morrissey and, at least indirectly, on Cassidy. In New York, in January 1962, FBI agent John Mabee made one of the most important recruitments of the Cold War. He persuaded Colonel Dmitry Fedorovich Polyakov of the GRU to pass secrets to the FBI. Mabee gave him the code name Top Hat. Polyakov, who rose to the rank of general, provided information of enormous value during 18 years as a spy for the United States. Top Hat told John Mabee that he had trained a GRU agent whom the FBI had persuaded to cooperate and who provided leads that enabled the Bureau to arrest a GRU team of illegals. Robert K. Balch and his wife Joy Ann. The couple had taken the identities of a Roman Catholic priest from Amsterdam, New York, and a housewife in Norwalk, Connecticut, neither of whom were aware that their identities had been stolen by Russian spies. Jimmy Morrissey handled the Balch case. It was only after completing the assignment that Morrissey was able to take over as case agent for Joe Cassidy. Polyakov had also provided leads that led the FBI to investigate Herbert W. Brokenhaupt, a young Air Force sergeant who repaired code machines for the Strategic Air Command. Brokenhaupt was meeting secretly with a GRU officer in Washington. The FBI's counterintelligence agents customarily worked several cases at a time. The Brokenhaupt case was also assigned to Morrissey, who by then was simultaneously juggling the Cassidy operation. On Halloween of 1966, the FBI arrested Brokenhaupt in California. He was charged with betraying the Strategic Air Command's codes to the Soviets, convicted in May 1967, and sentenced to 30 years. During the summer of 1966, the GRU informed Cassidy that they would communicate with him from then on in encoded SW, as well as in plain text on microdots. A 6-digit Numerical code, he was told, was to be keyed in a dictionary and concealed on pages of SW. The coded messages would back up the microdots. In August, Cassidy picked up a hollow rock containing a rollover camera, a microdot, and a 3x4-inch miniature dictionary. Entitled The Universal Webster, it was part of a series called Langenscheid's Universal Dictionaries, published by Barnes & Noble. Cassidy explained how the code worked. Each 6-digit group led to a word. Suppose I got a message with the number 243124. I would go to page 243, then to the first column because of the 1, then to the 24th word on the page. The word might be meet, the first word in a message that said, "Meet me at Springfield Bowling Alley, 9 o'clock Saturday, 10 October. In March 1967, Cassidy recovered another rock containing addition to the code, a numerical key designed to make the code a bit more difficult to crack. To each group I would add 062520, my birthday. The sum would then work with the dictionary the same way. Although the deception phase of Operation Shocker was designed primarily to persuade Moscow that the American scientists had developed the nerve gas GJ in binary form, there is evidence that the documents dealing with deadly biological weapons were passed to the Soviets as well. Charles Bevels, who succeeded Morrissey as Wallflower's case agent, said an Army scientist at Fort Detrick had worked on a biological agent called Strain X that became part of the deception operation. Joe passed the biological information. His job at Edgewood was administrative. He had no technical knowledge. His story to the Russians was that he came across this report at Edgewood. Although Bevels could not recall the nature of the disease or toxin labeled Strain X, another former FBI man, John OLoughlin, who later followed Bevels as Cassidy's case agent, said that among the materials passed to the GRU by Wallflower were documents dealing with, quote, botulinum toxin type E. In all likelihood, this was Strain X. Toxins are poisons produced by some microorganisms in plants. Snake venom is also considered a toxin. The CIA used shellfish toxin for the tiny poison darts developed by its technical experts to kill human targets. Although CIA Director William E. Colby testified to the Senate Intelligence Committee in 1975 that, quote, I do not know of any actual use, unquote. Because toxins are so lethal, they are attractive to biological warfare scientists around the globe. Botulinum toxin, produced by Clostridium botulinum bacteria, is among the world's deadliest poisons. It can result in paralysis and death. Stephen Pryor, president and CEO of Dyneport, a company in Reston, Virginia, that produces all the vaccines for the Defense Department to counter a potential germ warfare attack, explained that botulinum bacteria, quote, can elicit 7 different toxins, A through G. The strains of Clostridium botulinum were isolated by various scientists. Each strain produces 1 or more toxins. Scientists at Fort Detrick concentrated on the Hall strain of botulinum, since it produces large amounts of type A toxin, which is one of the most lethal forms of botulinum. Wait a minute, it's just botulinum. Botulinum. All right, apologize. In animal studies, Pryor said type E is one of the more potent toxins, but less potent than type A. Type E was discovered as the cause of 2 serious outbreaks of botulism in 1934, one in New York State that was traced to canned herring from Germany, and the other in Dnepropetrovsk, Ukraine, also due to fish. Type E is most often found lurking in the soils of Alaska, Northern Europe, and Japan. According to Benjamin Harris, Edgewood's former technical director, the formula for yet another deadly toxin may also have been passed to the Russians. Asked whether he was aware of any deception operations during his years at Edgewood, Harris replied, quote, "I know they were engaged in that as a matter of course. I was aware of one incident where we were asked by the intelligence people to supply information on a toxin that was not a good candidate for use as a weapon." It was ricin. It was considered a toxin because it was produced by a living organism, the castor bean plant. We did not consider it a good candidate because it was difficult to come by in large quantities and had not been synthesized at that time. Harris was never told in so many words to what use the information was put, but he said his impression was that it was passed on to the Soviets. The Edgewood scientists did not consider ricin a good weapon, but the KGB did. During the evening rush hour of September 7, 1978, George I. Markov, a Bulgarian emigre, writer, and opponent of the Soviet-backed regime in Sofia, was walking in London when a man jabbed him in the back of his right thigh with the sharp tip of an umbrella. Mumbling an apology, the man disappeared into the crowds. 4 days later, Markov was dead, the victim of a tiny metal pellet containing ricin toxin. After the collapse of communism, the new government of Bulgaria admitted that its spy agency had been responsible for the famed poison umbrella murder of Markov. More details were provided by General Oleg Kalugin, the former chief of counterintelligence for the KGB, who said that General Sergei Mikhailovich Golubev of the KGB's Directorate K was dispatched to Sofia along with a second officer. In Sofia, the ricin was tried on a horse, which died, and a prisoner, who did not because the pellet failed to release the toxin. The KGB also provided the umbrella and the poison pellet that were used to kill Markov. It is at least possible, therefore, that the umbrella attack employed that formula that Benjamin Harris believed had been passed to the Soviets. All right, we have to leave it right there tonight. And thanks for being with us. Oh man, isn't it interesting? The Fort Detrick may have been the source of the ricin. Well, we know a little bit about Fort Detrick, and some of it's not so good. Okay, you guys have a great evening. I'll see you Monday morning, and we're going to have a very, very big week. Garland and Nixon will be with us Monday night. On Wednesday night, it's a very special approach to St. Patrick's Day with the author Chris Fogarty and his work, The True History of Ireland, the Irish Genocide, 1845 to 50, will be our subject, and I look forward very much to exploring his book with him on Wednesday. That's the 8 p.m. And then on Friday, we'll have another representative from EIR, and let's see, that will be happening every Friday in March through a special arrangement with EIR through Marcia Malouk, who's been just terrific in helping me coordinate these Friday night EIR specials. So thanks, and we'll talk to you Monday.